I think because, you see, we take Shock-Headed Peters were the first signing to L. We take that as an example. I took Shock-Headed Peters to Warner.
Now, how did you find this? Carl Blake, wasn't it?
This was Carl Blake. Carl Blake had approached. I knew Carl Blake through the Lemon Kittens.
Okay.
He had this separate project, a different style group, and he'd made a recording that I thought was remarkably special. I Blood Brother B, and
it was a seminal record.
I went to Rob Dickens with it, who didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I was somewhat set back by this, and there was quite a lot of turmoil going on around Blanco at the time, and so this was a blow. And the group also, it was a blow for them. And so Jeff and I sat down and talked about it, and we decided that what we needed to do was to create a subsidiary nursery label to develop artists before they were ready to move on to the Warner's format, basically. I didn't really see it that way for Shock-Headed Peters. I thought it was a great record, and I thought Warner's could back it and put it in there, and I thought we'd have a hit, to be honest. I mean, it was a gay anthem like nobody had ever heard, frankly, and enormous. But they were tentative, and you know, Jeff didn't want to stick his neck out and support me in it, unfortunately, and so therefore we created this kind of, you know, I think they wanted to create a label for me to make a mess with in the corner, sort of thing, and maybe I developed something that was good enough for Warner Brothers.
But where did the name L come from?
I don't know. I think it was the idea that there was a film that Louis Buñuel made called L, and it was kind of that. I wanted a word that really meant nothing. And it could be metaphorical for almost everything, you see. Okay. And it's just nothing, it's just a graphic, really. Yeah. It's a word and a sort of a non-word at the same time. I wanted it to be almost, this would be an open book for so many different styles, really. I feel that with record label names, they tend to define the style and limit you almost from the word go.
That's true.
You know,
yeah.
And I didn't really want to do that with L. Yes.
And what was the next release after Shock-Headed Peters?
Vic Goddard.
Okay.
That was the same thing. Warner's wouldn't put it out. I spent £23,000 on a Vic Goddard album.
So you had quite a bit of scope there, didn't you?
Much to. I mean, Jeff was just beside himself. I spent £23,000. Vic.
That's more you spend at Cherry Red.
No, completely. I couldn't get Vic to leave Barnes. Vic lived in Barnes. I was also living in Barnes at the time. We were neighbours. But I couldn't get him to... Yeah, I just couldn't get him out of Barnes. So we used Olympic Studios, where the Rolling Stones had recorded Satanic Majesties, and, you know, it was not cheap. Yeah. And we got Working Week in to as the backing group as well. I can't remember who produced it. Robin Miller, I think it was probably. Yes, it was Robin Miller. And a wonderful album was created, and for one reason or another, Jeff did not share my enthusiasm about the album, and because he didn't share my enthusiasm about the album, Warner had, you know, they didn't see a united front.
Yes,
you see.
I understand.
And so it ended up also on L.
Yeah.
Then Momus comes to me. I was looking for Nick. I knew Nick Curry. I knew Nick Curry through... Yeah. See, I'd been friends with Ivo, who ran 4AD.
Okay.
Regular thing we used to do, Iain, after those wonderful days at Cherry Red, is I used to go for a summer drink at 4AD's then office in Hogarth Road in Earl's Court. And it was, you know, very friendly, just sort of comparing notes. We weren't sort of... in competition with one another.
That's one of the great things about independence. Then you weren't, you were mates, even though in theory you were competing, but somehow there was enough going on that you could actually have your own area and be mates and just swap notes. Really.
Absolutely. I mean, there was so much raw material out there. I mean, you could have had infinitely more labels, and there still would have been enough. Frankly, you know. And the different, you know, 4AD had a distinctly different style again, you know, which one had to respect, and they had released a single by the Happy Family. It hadn't been very successful.
So Nick was in the Happy Family.
Yes, and then an album. Nick had gone then to India. I began to inquire about his whereabouts. I enjoyed the Happy Family album. I thought, this is somebody I'd like to work with. I thought as a vocalist and as a lyricist, he was extremely special. And found that he was in India. Eventually he returned to England, and I invited him to get involved. Yeah. Really, we recorded an album, not at Olympic Studios by now, because my involvement in Blanco had ended. And by now I was back under Waterloo Bridge with Pat Collier, previously of the Vibrators, in Alaska studios on a much less hourly rate than I was on at Olympic Studios, recording the first Moments album, and that is where I became connected back with you, because Theo Chalmers, who ran Cherry Red Music, very successful Cherry Red Music, heard the Moments album that I'd made. And he phoned me up and he said, why don't you come and talk to Iain about this? And I said, well, you know, after what's gone before, I can't imagine anything less likely, you know. And he said, well, you know, let me have a think about it and see, blah, 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 and the rest of it. And so eventually I believe we had a meeting, and there were a few very memorable things said by you in that. And
And I offered to back L, didn't I?
Yes, you did. And so basically, we were back on the rails from that point on, and that was tremendous, really, because it meant that, you know, these ideas and these people I was meeting, you could make a reality of it. You know, when you're outside of the system, you know, you can talk great records and ideas and all that, you know, but, you know, ultimately you need facilities. You need resources.
So anyway, you came back to Cherry Red stable, you kept the L identity.
Yes.
Circus Maximus Moments album was the first album on L.
Yep.
And I think the second one was a Monochrome set album, wasn't it? I think.
That was a live album. I mean, I was just trying to get the ball rolling, really. I mean, that was not by any stretch of the imagination the Monochrome set at their best, really. I mean, it was a question of trying to get building some catalogue as quickly as possible, and getting some names in there as well. I felt in, you see, that with L, I thought it was very exciting at the time that we had in Vic Goddard Bid, Carl Blake, and Nicholas Curry. I mean, 4 incredible writers in the English language. I mean, as lyricists, as writers, they were as good as anybody out there. They were of 60s standard, without a doubt. Yeah. Without a doubt. I thought this was immediately better than Blanco and Negro, for sure. And so we sort of set forth, but we did encounter a certain amount of negativity from the press from the off, in fact. And
that was through not understanding the concept,
I
think.
I think it was. And eventually, I mean, you were very patient, but eventually I sculpted L into a different shape, really. I mean, I think it's an oversimplification to put it in these terms, but to begin with it was real, and then it became surreal.
Explain that.
And what I mean by that is that I began to sculpt the artists, to stylize the artists. It's a different thing. If you know, the usual formal process up until that point is that you sign an artist with all their baggage, and you make the best of it. And I didn't feel that this was going to work, really. And the industry was changing underneath us at the same time. The market was contracting and things were changing. So what I wanted to do was to, you know, the way that L developed, I wanted to go back, and I went right back to Sugar Sugar and Bubblegum, basically, as the structure. That is the foundation of what the King of Luxembourg, the Would-Be Goods, Bad Dream Fancy Dress, and the L that is best known to people, really, out there is. And instead of simply stopping there with Sugar Sugar, what I imposed on that, what I added to that, was layers of culture, of intelligence, of style, and of interest. So what you get is pop plus art, basically. This was the idea. And each artist would have an individual kind of style or identity of their own, which was not interchangeable between artists, you see. And I would get involved in just everything: the look, the way the songs were titled, the way the albums were titled. It was not any different than the way that there was a tradition of this in the 60s, where record companies were more involved in the presentation
you thought
of
names
artists.
of the acts, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
You thought names of acts, the concepts of the artwork. You told them the names of the songs.
That's right. But you see, Iain, it was not. The concept was always based on the nature of the subject. So, for instance, Jessica Griffin, I don't know if you ever met Jessica, I think you probably did.
Years ago.
Yes. Everything about the Would-Be Goods is Jessica. You know, I would know Jessica, and then I would build the concept around, at least in part, the reality of the world that she knew.
Yeah.
The world of Bad Dream Fancy Dress is the world of those 2 flightful girls from Leon C.